people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
The undisputed super featherweight champion of the world, Alicia, the Baumgardner.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It would seem that undisputed super featherweight champion Alicia Baumgardner has announced she will be working with trainer Derek James in her upcoming defense against Jennifer Miranda in her July debut on MVP. We don't see Derek James in the spotlight as much as we used to. In his heyday, he was training Errol Spence Jr. and Frank Martin and Anthony Joshua, Ryan Garcia. I think he is still working with Ryan for the upcoming Rolly Romero fight. Now, he's going to be working with Alycia. Not a bad choice. Once trainer of the year. And Alicia Baumgardner's trainer situation has been a fluid one. If you've been paying attention, for a time, she was being trained by former champion Tony Harrison. Then she left Tony, started training with somebody else. I don't know the guy's name. Now she's training with Derek. So you wonder what effect that is going to have on her performances moving forward, because I'm more accustomed to seeing Alicia Baumgardner move and punch. She's got power. She's got a lot of tools. It's what makes her so adaptable. I'm more accustomed to seeing Alicia play the pure boxer than the brawler, than the bruiser. But with a trainer like Derek James, and what you are used to seeing from Derek James's fighters, it's important to note that Alicia is adaptable. More often than not, she plays the pure boxer, but she's not limited to fighting that way like so many others. She can be more. Show some spite. Show some spice. Like what she did in the Michaela Mayer fight, the Elham Khaled fight, the Christina Lenardatu rematch, and the Delphine Persoon fight. She actually took it to Delphine Persoon, where Delphine is normally known for being the aggressive one. Alicia got aggressive with her, was well on her way to knocking her out before the contest was stopped on cuts. And now with Derek James in her corner, you get the sense that she is going to lean more into that methodology, that style of fighting, using her strength, using her power, her speed. Derek James didn't train many, if any, fence and fiddle fighters. Trained a lot of boxer punchers, and I feel like that's what we're going to see from Alicia moving forward. Less pure boxer, more boxer puncher. And that is a more fan-friendly style. Much easier for a casual audience to digest. She's got this upcoming defense against Jennifer Miranda, who MVP also signed. We've talked about that fight already. I think Alycia is going to overpower her. I think Alycia is going to bear down on her, barrel forward, and brutalize her. I wouldn't be surprised if Alycia knocked her out. Jennifer Miranda's never lost, let alone been knocked out, but there is a first time for everything, and this is Jennifer's first fight in the super featherweight division. So with those things in mind, and Alycia being who she is, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Alycia gets her out of there. She's being trained by Derek James now, and you can make of that what you will.
Look, I honestly, I thought he looked sharp. He looked great. He did great counterpunching. He had great power. I think he had a great performance. And you know, what you guys are talking about, maybe he being washed and stuff like that after his last couple of performances. The last performance for sure, the question was there. You know, you don't know how a fighter's going to react after a beating the way he did. You know, there's fighters that one bad beating ends their career. So we didn't know. But you know, he had a great performance, perfect opponent. Also, I'm not, you know, I can't say Spencer was just a bum in there. You know, he was legit, but nothing too dangerous, nothing too special. So it was a great matchup. I think Tszyu showed that he's back. He's a real deal, and he'll be a challenge for any of the top 154 pounders.
It was Robert Garcia's reaction to Tim Tszyu's triumphant return to his native Australia, where he stopped Joey Spencer in about 4 rounds. The rehabilitation effort is in full swing, and Tim did look good. I picked him to win the fight. I took it on faith that there was still enough left of the old Tim that he can at least beat Joey Spencer, and now he has to build on that. The next fight is supposed to be the Keith Thurman fight. I'm still skeptical as to whether or not that is going to happen.
Though addressing the rehabilitation effort, Tim loses to Bakhram Murtazaliev in October of last year, late October. About 6, close to 7 months later, he comes back. That's how you're supposed to do it. You shouldn't let the loss fester. You shouldn't wait too long to come back. It reminds me of when Joseph Parker was knocked out by Joe Joyce.
It didn't take Joseph long to come back after the loss, and he came back with a Joey Spencer kind of guy in a Joey Spencer kind of fight. He had 2 fights like that.
2 or 3.
2 or 3 fights leading up to what was the Wilder fight, the subsequent Zhilei Zhang fight, and the subsequent Martin Bakole fight. Now, Joseph Parker is back on top like he never left, and Tim Tszyu could take a similar approach.
And the key component is not letting too much time pass before you return to the ring.
Joseph Parker didn't let a lot of time pass, and neither did Tim Tszyu. They want to get him back out there over the summer months. What is summer to us in the Northern Hemisphere, winter to the Aussies.
The Keith Thurman fight.
How many times you spar for this fight?
Maybe about twice.
Damn.
I had 2 sparring sessions for this fight. I did a lot of mitt work. I did a lot of bag work, and a lot of mental work in preparation for this one.
Just preserving yourself?
What's that?
Just continuing to preserve yourself?
It wasn't so much about preserving oneself. It's by the time they really solidified the fight, because you hear about a contract overseas. I wasn't sure what was happening. And I just really needed to focus on just my weight cut.
Yeah.
So I was just focus on my diet and my cardio. There was a lot of cardio preparation, making sure I hit my cardio every night. And I wanted to get another sparring session in before I flew out.
Yeah.
And then I debated whether or not I was going to spar when I was over there. And I didn't want to give that to them. I didn't want any leaked information.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided, it is what it is, man. It ain't nothing new to me.
There's an important detail there. That ahead of the Brock Jarvis fight, Keith Thurman only got in 2 sparring sessions. It stood out to Sean Porter like it stood out to me.
Only 2 sparring sessions for a fighter who hasn't fought in, 2-3 years?
Keith Thurman is 36 years old, and for years now, he's been an injury-prone fighter. So if he only got in 2 sparring sessions, it's likely because he didn't want to become injured. He wanted to make sure he'd make it there. And that was for Brock Jarvis.
Tim Tszyu is quite another thing.
I question whether or not that fight is going to happen. If it does, I favor Tim Tszyu to win the fight. I figure that Keith Thurman's going to do what Keith Thurman always does, and that's move and punch. Try to set a trap, walk a guy into something hard. But Tim Tszyu has seen that style before, seen it on multiple occasions. In America with Terrell Gausha, in Australia with Tony Harrison.
He'll see it again if he has to fight Keith.
Keith Thurman is not going to stand there and trade with Tim Tszyu. If he's going to do anything, he's going to move and punch. As Tim Tszyu barrels forward, tucked behind a high guard, catching and shooting. And I expect that Timmy will go to his body. Timmy is quite an accomplished body puncher, and we all know by now that Keith Thurman doesn't like it to the body.
Nobody does.
But Keith Thurman, least of all, for years now it's been cited as an area of weakness for one-time, run-time Thurman.
I think Tim Tszyu wins the fight if the fight happens. If the fight doesn't happen, then he'll fight Michael Zarafa and knock him out instead. And Keithy,
I guess he can go on another 2 or 3 year hiatus. He periodically takes these 2 and 3 year stints of inactivity in between fights. I don't imagine very many big offers are pouring in for Keith Thurman at this time at 36 years old, when his last fight was all the way out there in Australia, and the Americans have stopped caring about him.
It still feels like the Tim Tszyu fight is the biggest fight that he could be in at this time.
Spring is on the horizon, and summer is fast approaching behind it. So we'll find out shortly as to whether or not this fight is going to materialize.
We're discussing that fight with Louis. No firm offers made, but I don't see. Tell me another fight that Benavidez could make. That light heavyweight division is actually quite thin at the top in terms of big names. And, you know, I think Callum's got great options ahead. He's going to be mandatory to Dimitri Bivol. You've got the potential Yarde fight on a 5v5. You've got the Benavidez fight. You know, it's really interesting. And I think David Benavidez against Callum Smith's a hell of a fight.
Well, it's a good fight for the hardcores, and it is a credible scalp for David Benavidez if he can collect it.
It's all right.
But it's not the kind of fight you charge Americans $80 to see. That's what it ain't. So what you want to pay attention to is that Samson Lukowicz let it be known that that fight was offered to them by Turkey for millions upon millions of dollars, presumably to go down in Saudi, which they rejected.
Here's the stupid part.
So that you can turn around and propose that that same fight with that same fighter happen in America.
Why is that stupid?
Because for fighting Callum Smith in America at an $80 price point, hoping that you can make your money from the upside of the pay-per-view, you could have just boxed him in Saudi and not had to worry about that. Think about it. You could have boxed Callum Smith on the undercard of Better Be versus B Vol 3, made your money, and you wouldn't have had to worry about how the pay-per-view did or how the pay-per-view performed. You would have been guaranteed your money up front.
The way you guys are telling it, what, you're gonna do that fight in America, do it in Vegas, and charge people $80 to see it?
Simple question. What do you think that fight does commercially at the box office? How many people do you think are gonna pay $80 to see David Benavidez fight Callum Smith?
Not a lot.
So for fighting Callum Smith in America, at an $80 price point for the pay-per-view that most people aren't gonna buy, you should have just taken Turkey up on his offer, and you should have just boxed him in Saudi.
If you were just gonna end up fighting him anyway.
Now, I'm not saying he is, but this is the story that's out there, that David Benavidez versus Callum Smith is a potentiality. My honest opinion?
I'm not convinced that fight happens, and David may leave this division without defending that newly obtained title.
What's even worse is that the Callum Smith fight is actually a winnable fight for David. You guys know I'm not a fan of David or his boxing, but if you put pressure on Callum, he does tend to fold.
It's what John Ryder did, it's what Canelo did, it's what Artur Beterbiev did, and it's what David Benavidez could do.
Crash the pocket, crowd Callum Smith, force him onto his back foot, and outwork him. He doesn't like that.
It's a winnable fight.
And by Samson Lukowicz's own admission, that is a fight that was offered to them for millions upon millions of dollars, which they rejected. To do what? To bring that same fight to America and charge people $80 to see it?
What are you, stupid?
There's talks about fighting Yarde in his country. You know, that would be a great opportunity, great experience. You know, we want to go out and fight everywhere, you know.
Everywhere except Saudi Arabia.
And for David to gain more fans and take David on a tour, you know.
No, I don't know. I don't understand how the same guys who wouldn't fight Callum Smith in Saudi Arabia would turn around and fight Anthony Yarde in the UK. You fight Callum Smith in Saudi, that's neutral terrain. Neutral for the both of you because you're not from there and neither is he. Whereas boxing Anthony Yarde in the UK,
you're going to concede home field advantage to Anthony Yarde when you're the reigning WBC champion? Yeah, right.
And that's the biggest part of the reason I think fighting Anthony Yarde is just a lot of bullshit. It's just a lot of hot air. They're not going to fight that guy.
Anthony Yarde is en route to take on Lyndon Arthur for the third time on the undercard of Ben versus Eubank.
If he wins the third fight, he can target Callum Smith, who we just mentioned.
He can.
He can target Joshua Buatsi for what would be a very big fight. Big fight in the UK. Wouldn't require him to go anywhere. And those are all sensible and sensical fights for Anthony, to where when it came out that he might fight David Benavidez, I didn't believe it then, and I don't believe it now.
Be a good fight if they made it.
Styles making fights. I happen to think the Callum Smith fight is a bit more winnable than the Anthony Yarde fight would be for David Benavidez, because Anthony Yarde is very much a mid-range to inside fighter and a body puncher, a strong one, battle-tested, that he's been in there with Sergey Kovalev, with Artur Beterbiev, and they stopped him.
Yeah, they knocked him out, but you don't punch like they do. That's established. You fought an older Alexander Vosdik, and where Artur Beterbiev took him out years ago, you couldn't take him out years later.
The point is that David Benavidez doesn't punch like those guys.
So where they might have knocked out Anthony Yarde, I'm not so sure that David can.
David Benavidez, who spends the entirety of a fight trying to put punches together mid-range to inside, and so does Anthony Yarde. That'd be a gunfight.
You know, you can fluster Callum Smith in the pocket. You can back him off, whereas Anthony, I'm not so sure.
And I am to believe that you're willing to fight this guy in his neck of the woods. You would not concede your home field advantage for a Bivol fight in Saudi or a Callum Smith fight in Saudi, but you're gonna fight Anthony in the UK.
Yeah, right.
Said it in my previous video. Pressed for answers, it seems to me that Jose Benavidez didn't know what to say. All he could hang on to was the potentiality of a Zurdo Ramirez fight, which he mentioned more than once, because he knows that's what they're gonna do.
But he doesn't want to give it away yet.
I've entertained the possibility that David Benavidez, at some point at the end of this year or the beginning of the next one, may move up there to fight Zurdo Ramirez. And how, if he does, and he actually manages to win that fight, that doesn't really solve all his problems. One could argue that that's actually the beginning of all his problems, because if you win 2 alphabet titles in the cruiserweight division, Jai Opetaia is going to come after you. The boxing community at large, they're going to expect you to fight him.
They're gonna come after you.
And dropping back down to the light heavyweight division is not an option. Do you seriously think if David debuts as a cruiserweight, he's gonna then after that boil all the way back down to 175?
I don't think so. He goes up there, he stays up there.
No way he goes all the way up to cruiser, then moves back down after to light heavyweight.
Watching how all of this unfolds, it's all a byproduct of David Benavidez's extended stay in the super middleweight division. That by all rights, he should have actually moved up a long time ago. The right time to do it would have been circa 2020, when he blew the weight.
Issue was, if he would have moved up then, he would have been in the mix for fights with Artur, fights with Dimitri, and he never really wanted to be in that conversation.
So he stays at super middleweight a while longer, completely outgrows that weight, to the point where even making light heavy is difficult for him.
Think about it. He's only been at light heavyweight for 2 fights, and they're already talking about a move to cruiser.
The walls are closing in.
In spite of what narratives are propped up and what mental gymnastics are used to defend his business decisions, in reality, he's running out of options and he's running out of time.
You go to cruiser, you fight Zurdo, say you win.
Then what? Then, the biggest fight for you, for the best money, is a Jai Opetaia fight.
And it's only for the best money if you work with Turkey, which you guys don't want to do.
Down the line, if you win a belt or some belts and you fight Jai Opetaia, that might pay you a nice chunk of change, a career high purse, but it's not without its perils. Staying an unbeaten fighter and making the most money you can are mutually exclusive.
You can't always do both.